it's like I've learned like you really don't want to be that person. I mean, that's what I would
Yeah.
say to people. Yeah.
Like sociopolitically, we're both anarchists and definitely
Yeah.
pro-liberty, but that doesn't that like because we are anarchists and pro-liberty, as much as we care for that, is why we value the rule of law so much.
Yeah.
Why we value like them to be you come in and announce that this is the lay of the land here. This is what we're doing here. This is what we're trying to achieve, and we'll do it within these parameters. I like getting as much of that information ahead of time, and the stronger we actually stick to that and know about it, the better. Does not necessarily mean we have to stick into that, but if we all understand that this is what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish is better, we'll try to do it within these parameters. We come to that agreement and we're working together. You'll also understand when it's like, okay, now we understand there's some kind of holiday season. We have to work a little longer. We have to cut some corners here. Even when you get to that point where you come to a general agreement that maybe we have to bend the law here or we can't stick to this strictly, we understand why we're doing it and we understand how we'll do it. And we also understand when this situation ends, we'll be able to return to this kind of agreement that we had ahead of time because of the benefits from that agreement. Those are the kind of things that I think are a bit lost. And when you're self-employed, when you're running a company, when you're doing these kind of things, you're going to get to that point to those cost benefit analyses that are there that I think exist. But going back to sports again, that kind of thing that you see, LeBron James goes out and he violates COVID protocol. He gets a whole different deal than somebody who's like sitting on the bench going out to violate the COVID protocol. You're not going to deal with those people in the same way. No. Now, that might bring resentment within that field and things like that, but I think people watching from the outside can understand the amount of effort and skill and ability and the input that LeBron James is giving to the team and the league would be a lot higher. Now, in maybe the perfect world, they would be held to the same exact rules. And I would argue that if you actually did hold LeBron to those same kind of rules in the grander scheme of things, I think it would be better for human flourishing. But that's not the world we live in right now, and there's going to be those considerations. Somebody who is the son of the person who runs the company, chances are they're going to get away with a few more things than somebody who's not.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm a big proponent of don't hire friends or family. I mean, some people debate the merits of that, but like the problem is I've seen this pan out where it's like, a son or nephew or whoever gets hired, then it's like they don't do things that like I remember like one place I worked, like this woman worked there who was basically friends with the boss and like she didn't really do much except walk around and talk to people but got paid. But the thing is, because she was friends with the boss, like you couldn't say anything and the boss wasn't going to fire her. So like there's situations like that. And then it's like either way it's bad because if you're an employee, again, they resent that person because it's like, okay, if I do that, I'll get fired, but they're friends with the boss so they get paid and they don't get in trouble. But then it's also like if you hire that person and you're the boss, you put yourself in that situation of, do I reprimand my friend, which could jeopardize our friendship, or do I just let them slide, which creates resentment among other people? Like, I think people have this very like idyllic view of like, oh, a nice family-owned business. I mean, if you can make it work, fine. But if you're not going to hold people to the same standards, it just doesn't work because then it just comes down to, family loyalty, letting people slide, and it's, that creates more problems down the road. I mean, even recommending friends, like there are very few people I will recommend. Like I'll recommend when I worked in restaurants, I was saying like, I'll recommend like employees that really stood out, or like if they're my friend and they're the kind of person that I know on their own they're going to excel and get promoted, all that, I'll recommend them. But I will never do this. Oh, I'm your friend, can you give me a recommendation? Because it's like I don't want to attach myself to someone who's going to crash and burn.
Yeah. And with that, to push back on that, first of all, with this series, I'm not recommending you do business with anybody I'm talking to. This one. Don't hire Stephen based on what he says. No, I'm kidding. But it's just to get that information out there so you can know more about it. But some pushback on the whole friends and family thing. This goes all again to problems occur not because of what X is, because of how we define X. Think about how most people define friends and family. And the way most people define friends and family would not fit the way I would define friends and family. For somebody to be a friend or for me to consider them a family, and there's a difference between family and relatives. You don't get to pick your relatives. You're born to somebody, they give you up for adoption. That person who you were born to is your relative, technically. But the parents that raise you and nurture you, they would be your family because of that relationship that you have. So now different families have different rules. Like there's a common thing when people say blood is thicker than water. But in practice, that's normally, I'm going to let somebody who is my family get away with harming me in ways that I would not allow a friend to do it. I'm like, that seems to be mixed up. Someone's like, oh, I know this person too well, so I'm going to friend zone them. I'm like, wait, you get along with this person really well, so instead of dating this person, you're going to go sleep with this random person that's kind of hot? Like, why would you do that? Like, why are you investing this time? So I think And it comes back to the thing, the rule of law. You just set those actual understandings, set those examples. And in my experience, people I do consider family, like the reason I consider Stephen my friend so much is I know that if I say something he considers to be off, to be not fitting to reality, he will point that out and say, hey, are you sure of this? If he's not understanding something that I'm saying, he'll ask. If I don't understand something that he says, I know I can ask him and say, hey, by the way, did you mean to do this? Is this in this way? And he won't take it as an attack. So someone like Stephen is part of why we're doing this series, part of why we're starting this. This is something that I'm like, hey, this is something that I want to invest with time because I can trust Stephen and I can know we can work towards this thing. And as we were mentioning before, what's the difference between a workplace where the person who runs it and owns it is invested into it versus something that's kind of corporate and not necessarily directly into that? And that's part of the problem with the state is that people don't have that ownership of the things that they're doing. It's very divorced from them. And then they tie that into and they think they can have a familial relationship with the state. A lot of single parents think they can marry the state. A lot of men think they can enter relationships with and parent children and then pass that on to the state to actually be the father and its provider. And that's in a natural environment. I think, unfortunately, we have broken down this idea and definition of what friends and family are. And that's part of why I think that whole saying, oh, you don't work with friends and family, when we can probably all think of rather successful families and things like that that have happened to that. And I think this also goes into that whole general negative idea towards nepotism, where it's like some of that nepotism is kind of okay because somebody has actually been trained and raised to actually understand that information more. But then the same people participating in nepotism also take that and just put the kid into the position without preparing for them. So it's about the process, not just the title of the thing, but what exactly is going into, what's the content of it, what's the recipe, what's the ingredients that's going to that actual dish. Because like with the last series we talked to, a burger is a simple thing, two things holding some kind of proteiny thing, but there's so many different ways you can actually make that burger. So family and friends, that's just the burger, but there's so many different ways you can constitute what that family and friends is. The quality or the level of the family and friends is a vast range, I think. Thank you for listening. This has been a clip from an actual longer recording that I'll try to leave a link to on the screen or somewhere around here where you're listening to this.
Presents. 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 Presents.
Peasants.
Okay. Okay.